Hey everybody, good morning. We start microphone, yes. Okay. Some practical issues before we start, and I give the floor to our moderator, Nicholas Keppel, our program manager at the Danish Institute for Human Rights. Um, it's not on. Yeah, it's actually the only reason that I speak here because everybody have to have a headphone because there is a simultaneous interpretation and will disturb you if you hear those sounds. We will be here until 1 o'clock and we'll have a coffee break at some point, depends on the discussions. And we will move ahead to our canteen for a networking lunch session so we get to know each other in this environment. And some people who are involved directly in Yemen will have a close meetings afterwards after lunch. Our hashtag for today is you can see it down here, Yemen CBH, which is used both in Twitter, Facebook, and Google Plus, and so on. We will put some materials attached to this hashtag also after the seminar. And the seminar is also live streamed, so there are some people are actually watching us right now online from abroad that they cannot attend with us physically. And with this, I give the floor to Mr. Nicholas.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming today to attend this seminar on the conflict in Yemen and the political situation in Yemen in general. And as the representative of the Danish Institute for Human Rights, I would like to give the word to our international director and deputy director, Mrs. Eva Gamby.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, and I'd like to echo and welcome you all today to this seminar, and with our special focus on why Yemen is struggling with both internal and external conflicts. I hope that you will get an opportunity today to actually get an insight into the conflict and also to discuss more specifically how Denmark and the international community can assist Yemen's efforts to actually move forward. The seminar aims to provide you with a platform for discussions of the current conflict, both with Danish and Yemenis actors, and I'm very happy to see this panel here with a good mix. Just a short briefing on the Institute's involvement in Yemen and where we are coming from. We began our work in Yemen back in 2007, and we had a partnership with the Ministry of Human Rights. And also a partnership with the Yemeni Human Rights Network. Our partnership with the Ministry of Legal Affairs was then initiated a bit later and formalized in 2013. And then a year after, we had a partnership established with the Yemeni Forum for Business and Human Rights. The Institute also cooperates with other relevant strategic partners at times, such as the Ministry of Education and the Secretariat for National Dialogue. So we have a number of entry points with our Yemeni partners over the years. Through the Yemeni-Danish partnerships, we have achieved good results, and one example is the establishment of one of the strongest civil society networks in Yemen, the Yemen Human Rights Network. It's a very well organized and very influential human rights network, which was established in partnership with the Institute. Through our support, the network has acted as a civil society anchor in important national processes, as well as voicing social society concerns to international processes. And just a concrete example of the international processes voice is the way that the network actually managed to change the Yemeni government's position on Yemen's UPR. Initially, the government stated that they were going to agree to all recommendations within 6 months. Um, but then, after pressure from the Yemeni Human Rights Network, the government actually changed a little bit position and accepted 106 recommendations out of 192 recommendations immediately. So this is an example of how the network has been able to really push the agenda. One of the individuals whose efforts were key in this achievement was the current Minister of Human Rights, Mr. Al-Abbasi. And he is currently attending with the government delegation the UN peace negotiations in Geneva. At the time when he was active within the network, he was, of course, not a minister, but a representative, and he has shared his experience with this work also here in Copenhagen at a seminar last December, which we were very happy that he saw time to do. The Yemeni Human Rights Network, with the Institute support, has also succeeded in having most of their draft recommendations into the recent UN resolution on technical assistance and capacity building for Yemen. An important figure in this process was the chairman of the Yemen Human Rights Network, Dr. Albana, who we also have honored here and hosting here in Copenhagen. Another key partner in our partnership is Dr. Alme Khalafi, the Minister for Legal Affairs. He was supposed to be with us here today, but could not attend because he was urgently asked to attend the peace talks in Geneva, which of course is sad for us, but very good for the process. So that is what happened. During his short stay in office, he has already made tremendous progress on efforts to reinvigorate the ministry that has been very inactive for a decade. He has initiated a process to ensure the mainstreaming of human rights into the entire legal infrastructure of Yemen, and the ministry is also undertaking now a review of all Yemeni laws going back to 1991, with a view to ensuring their accordance with the forthcoming new constitution and also harmonization with the international conventions ratified by Yemen. And we are indeed proud as an institute that the ministry has asked us for our assistance in this very challenging process. So I'm convinced that today, with this excellent panel that we have, that there will be shed more light on the recent political and human rights developments in Yemen. I know that the panel will be painting a different picture of the situation in Yemen compared to the stereotypical picture of Yemen that we often see in the media, also associated with Al-Qaeda and drones. So I will conclude by wishing you a good and fruitful discussion, and I will leave the floor in the able hands of Nicholas, who's the program manager on the MENA region here at the Institute. So I wish you a good day. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Eva, and thank you for taking time to open the seminar. I know you're busy and also have to leave, but thank you very much for attending the opening session. Without further ado, I'll give the floor to Siris Hartkorn, who is a political analyst on Yemen and until very recently lived in Sana'a, and who is also the partner in Safer Yemen, who focuses on security assessment in Yemen. But you can do maybe a more thorough introduction as well. And Siris is going to talk about the chronology of the conflict and the potential stakeholders in the conflict. So thank you for joining us today, Siris.
Thank you, Nicholas.
I think you should put this one.
Great. Thank you, Nicholas. And good morning, everyone. It's the first day of Ramadan, so for someone, this is a tough day. To those Ramadan Kareem. So, briefly speaking, I came first to Yemen in 2009 as a researcher for Lund University to research on conflicts in Yemen. And many of those conflicts that were then 2009 have been transformed over the years and are still the conflicts present today. So it's been some interesting years in Yemen, and a lot of dramatic changes, and unfortunately, not many positive developments. Looking back 1 year from now, a bit more than a year from now, Yemen has just concluded an extensive national dialogue process that had led to a series of recommendations for a forward transition. It was a national dialogue that brought in stakeholders and groups from across the board of actors in Yemen, including the Houthis, who were very committed at that time. It was a crucial part, a cornerstone in the bigger transition Yemen was going through following the Arab Spring and the ouster of ex-President Saleh in 2011. At that time, a bit more than a year ago, the UN and others among the international community who were a big part of designing this process were talking about Yemen as a model of inspiration for the rest of the region, as a success of peaceful, inclusive political transition. And yet today, a bit more than a year later, we stand with a devastating civil war and a country that is falling apart into pieces that it will be very hard to get back together. So the key question is, how did we get to this point? How did Yemen, over the course of 1 year, move to where we stand today? And the answer to that is complex. There's a lot of overlapping factors contributing to the conflict that we see today. And I'm not going to go into all of them because that would take the rest of the day. But I will go into the transition and what was wrong in the transition, which mistakes were made when the transitional plan was designed primarily by the international community. And in that, there were four key structural mistakes that some of them from the beginning and some of them emerged. First of all, and probably the biggest challenge or difficulty the transition had was that the power sharing agreement in the transitional government was a 50-50 power sharing between, on one hand, the former ruling party, the General People Congress, PPC, Saleh's former party, and on the other hand, JNP, which is a gathering of different opposition parties, including the biggest party, Islam, the Yemeni equivalent of the Muslim Brotherhood. First of all, both these blocs were a part of the former power elites. Even the opposition in Yemen had been a part of the ruling and the corruption and the patronage and the regime for many, many years. So it was the old power elites that were represented. And second of all, these two parties were in deep conflict with each other. And having a 50-50 power sharing agreement meant that the new cabinet and the transitional government couldn't really implement anything. They couldn't get anywhere because every time a step was made, it would be overruled or taken back by the other side. So there was a constant infighting, a constant competition and ineffectiveness within the transitional government that led to a constant stalling of the reforms needed during the transition. The second biggest mistake was allowing or granting Saleh, the ex-president, immunity. That allowed him to continue to play a role and remain in the country. One thing is the immunity, but also that he was left in the country and allowed him to continue to play a role as a spoiler, continue to uphold his presence, build his networks, and plot behind the scenes. And that was something that very significantly backlashed 1 year ago when he aligned himself with the Houthis, which I will get back to. During the transition, not in the beginning, but during the transition, and especially a year ago, Hadi, the transitional president, a former GPC vice president, started centering power on his own inner circle. So he started doing actually what former elites had done as well, and that is actually one of the crucial things that led to the Houthi dissatisfaction with the process. And then finally, and overshadowing almost everything was the economy, which was already from the onset of the transition in a very poor state, and there was significant reform needed in order to save the Yemeni economy, and that was not done. The economy was left to sail on its own, and led to a worsening and continuous economic crisis. all of these things were among the things the Houthis capitalized on when they went into Sana'a in September last year. After first moving south, they managed to regain or to turn tribes in Amran on the way to Sana'a, tribes that had traditionally been in the Islah highland. They turned around and joined the Houthis, and a lot of people were dissatisfied with the way things were heading, and that's why the Houthis were able to get as far as they did, mainly because they partnered up with former President Saleh and his allies in the armed forces. In September, this was still quite peaceful. The Houthis went in and the militarily challenged their primarily enemies in the Islamic Party. But other than that, it was peaceful. It led to a signing of a PNPA, Peace and National Partnership Agreement, with Hadi's government. And so the situation remained relatively calm during the fall until in January, where things escalated. And there were several reasons for this, but the trigger was the constitution, the drafting of the constitution, and the discussion over how many regions should be in the federal system. The laid out plan was 6 regions. The Houthis opposed that. The Houthis prior to the war had an agenda which was not to rule. A lot of media around the world portrayed this as a coup. They went in and couped the power. Actually, that was not the original intention. The original intention was to broker the power and to influence and to put pressure on Hadi. At this point, the Houthis did not want to resume the responsibility of governing because that came with a lot of challenges, especially related to the economy. And so they would rather stand on the outside, influencing things than actually take responsibility. Saleh himself was at this point positioning to to let the Houthis run their thing, do their mistakes, and then step in as the savior of the country. And this actually brings me to where we stand now. Who are the actors in the conflict right now? Because looking at Geneva, most people know there's currently negotiations going on in Geneva, and so-called peace talks or consultations. And there you have broadly 2 sides represented. On one side, Hadi and his exile government, influenced also partly by exiled figures from the Islamic Party. And on the other side, you have the Houthis and also bringing in Saleh and parts of TPC, but TPC as a party is split. That's what it looks like in Geneva. But the reality on the ground in Yemen is a bit more complex than that. And in order to really establish an understanding of the conflict and where the conflict might be heading, we need to look at the conflicting line and the various actors that are involved. First of all, there's Hadi and the exiled government. They are based primarily in Riyadh and have been since the beginning of this conflict. And for them, the main problem where it stands right now is that internationally they're still the recognized government. From international community side, this is still the government that is being backed. But internally in Yemen, it's not a government that holds much legitimacy, and especially Hadi as a president has close to no support. Already before the conflict escalated, Hadi was getting his support from the international community, primarily the US and the Gulf states, and that has been exacerbated further during this conflict because a president who flees his own country and goes to a neighboring country and asks them to come in with a military campaign that has been witnessed is not popular, even if he had been popular before, which he wasn't. So there's, I haven't met anyone in Yemen who wished to see Hadi back, let me put it that way. And that plays a challenge in solving this conflict, because how do you come up with political solution when what is the legitimate government is basically unwanted? Most people who backed Hadi as a president and the transitional government did it because it was a symbol of a legitimate transition, and that symbol was lost months ago. So this is one of the key challenges. Needless to say, Hadi is widely influenced by Saudi Arabia now and their policies, because that's where he's based. And Saudi, on their behalf, is influenced by numerous factors, including internal rivalries and regional tensions as well as the policies towards Yemen, and I think we will get more into that with Hannah later. The Houthis, as the other main actor, started out as a quite populistic force. They gained a lot of support. The Houthis are not big enough to have accomplished on their own what they accomplished. They did it because a lot of people turned their way and supported them for strategic reasons, pragmatic reasons, and sometimes ideological reasons. Starting out, they came into Sana'a saying we will protect civilians, we will restore some sort of sense of stability and political process. We will get this political process back on the track. Now the Houthis have been radicalized as a part of this conflict, especially in Aden, they're committing war crimes and are engaging in an increasingly intense conflict that is endangering civilians, something that wasn't witnessed previously with the Houthis. At the same time, they have not been weakened by the air campaign that this has now been going on for 11 weeks. They remain actually as strong as they were prior to the conflict, and that's worth stopping and thinking about, that 11 weeks of Saudi airstrikes have not weakened them even the slightest. Instead, actually, they have taken the fight increasingly towards Saudi Arabia by making provocations on the border. In the beginning, small-scale provocations, shooting in a couple of rockets, trying to make small incursions, but recently also firing in a Scud missile, which is quite a significant provocation of Saudi Arabia. The Houthis are fighting on many fronts. It's difficult to verify the exact agenda. There's also internally in the group, they are not necessarily under central command, or they are not under central command. So one thing is what Abdul Malik al-Houthi lays out in his speeches, and one thing is what his forces on the ground are actually engaging in. And here it also becomes tricky because they are mixing up with other groups on the ground. Overall, they have expressed that they are willing to take part in negotiations, but they are also taking a very strong stand against Saudi Arabia, against Hadi and his government, and against the international community, and that stands in the way for finding a political solution. Saleh, the ex-president, remains a factor. He partnered up, as mentioned, strategically with the Houthis because he thought he was to gain from it, not because he likes the Houthis. We have to here remember that he fought 6 rounds of war against the Houthis as recently as in 2010. And again, Yemen is fluid. Alliances move quite rapidly. Saleh has been significantly weakened during this conflict. He is actually the biggest loser or has suffered the greatest losses during the airstrikes. At almost all parts of the military that he controls have been destroyed. These weapon storages, his units. So he is the one who have suffered the biggest setback in terms of power. Including that his and all his family's houses in Sana'a have been turned into rubble in recent weeks. And that has, of course, shifted the power balance between the Houthis and Saleh, and put the Houthis in a stronger position within that partnership, which will influence how the power will look like at a later stage. Prior to this conflict, there was a lot of talk that Saleh would come in at some point as that neutral, somehow more neutral, stabilizing effect, or that the sun would, despite that being a setback for the last couple of years of revolution and transition. But that has changed now. He's not in a position of as much power as he was before, and it is doubtful whether he will be able to make a return as he has done previously in his political career. Yet he is still important in generating local support for the Houthis. So, for example, in Aden, where we see people lining up fighting along the Houthis as well as the resistance. So there's a split in Aden. It is not Houthis, there are no Houthis in Aden, but it's former GPC who came after the civil war in the south, settled in Aden, and who are now joining that side of the conflict. So his communities, his supporters are still quite crucial for the Houthis at the local level. That leaves us to go a bit south to Aden and the south that has seen some of the worst of the conflict. Especially Aden has been very widely impacted. All like entire districts are almost burned down. and the civilian population are the ones who have suffered the most during this conflict. All of Yemen has suffered, but especially in Aden, where there has been street battles, on the contrary to what there has been in Sana'a and other cities, have been very intense. In Aden, we see the Southern resistance who have taken up arms against the Houthis, and here it's quite interesting to look at who are the Southern resistance, because in international media they are portrayed as pro-Hadi forces, which couldn't be any more wrong. They are nowhere close to being pro-Hadi. They would also have taken up arms against Hadi if he had stayed in Aden, which is one of the reasons why he decided to flee. The Southern resistance is a very difficult mixture of various groups. It contains former PDRY, Southern Army, ex-Southern Army officers. It contains youth militants. It contains Hirakis, the Southern separatist movement, and it contains Islamist groups. It's a very complex mixture of various groups. They have received some funding, weapons and training from Saudi Arabia, but again, they're not necessarily. It's a strategic alliance. They're not supporting Hadi to return because, for their part, most of them has an agenda of Southern succession, and Hadi, as a president for all of Yemen, goes against that objective. Then there's another very interesting trend that is very important to notice, and that is the formation of other resistance groups. So that's primarily in, not necessarily in the south, but primarily in tribal highlands and Marduk, but also in Thais. Have we seen this, and increasingly in Sana'a and other areas. And those resistance groups, and when I say resistance, they're resistant towards the Houthis. And they are receiving funding, weapons, and training from Saudi Arabia, but also from other places. And it's likely that we will see them playing an increasingly prominent role. There's been a lot of speculations on whether we were going to see airstrike, ground forces coming in from the Gulf, and whereas it cannot be completely ruled out, it's not as likely as seeing these smaller cells of resistance groups popping up and carrying out different forms of attacks. None of them are strong enough to fight the Houthis, apart from, of course, in some tribal areas where there's a tribal resistance. But they are strong enough to carry out hidden bomb attacks on checkpoints, IED attacks, and I actually tend to put even the new Islamic State that we're seeing, who took responsibility yesterday for three car bombings of mosques in Sana'a, to put them under this category as well. It's a new group. We see a lot of these groups are Sunni radicals of one type or another, but a lot of them are also tribal groups. But there is a mobilization along sectarian lines, which I will get back to later. Then there's AQAP, Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which have gained strength during this Iran conflict. They have managed to seize the opportunity of the power vacuum. They have strengthened themselves in Hadramaut, the oil-rich governorate towards the east, where they are also controlling Mukalla, a strategic port city in the Gulf of Aden. AQAP just had their leader killed in a drone strike a couple of days ago, which is not necessarily a good thing because the newer generations within AQAP tend to be more radical and more IS, Islamic State leaning than the previous generation. So we can see a gradual radicalization also of AQAP. Just briefly on AQAP, there's always concerns of when they take territory, but in a Yemeni context, they can only take territory to the extent that the tribes are partnering up, at least in tribal areas, which is the most of the country, and the tribes are pragmatic. The tribes will do that to the extent it benefits their own goals, but they are not ideologically turning to AQAP. And therefore, we always see that once AQAP challenge the tribes by assessing too much authority, or by seeking to in other ways play out the tribes turn and resist, like what happened in Abiyan, where popular committees formed and took up weapons and threw Al Qaeda after they were there a couple of years ago. I will leave out Saudi Arabia because I think we will get into that a lot more later, and I'm running out of time. But I'm just at the end gonna touch very briefly on the long-term implications of this war because there are several long-term implications. Right now here, of course, Yemen is facing a very severe humanitarian crisis. Around 20 million people are in urgent need of humanitarian assistance. According to the Oxfam British organization, Yemen is the country in the world with the biggest humanitarian need right now. According to WFP, a famine is around the corner if nothing is done. So the humanitarian situation is the far most critical aspect of this conflict, and that is widely generated not so much just by the fighting, but by the air and sea blockade of all imports. And Yemen is a country that import 90% of all goods. So that is a key problem and will have long-term implications as well as the destruction of infrastructure, ranging from all levels of infrastructure, schools, hospitals, airports, seaports, bridges, everything that is going to take a long time to rebuild. Um, One of the other very worrying long-term implications of this conflict is the sectarian divides and the damage that is being done to the Yemeni social fabric. Yemen is a country that has a very long tradition of solving its conflict, of entering into negotiations and mediations. Conflicts in the past in Yemen have never, or now I have to be careful because there have been civil wars in the south that are very bloody, but especially in tribal areas in the northern parts of the country, there is a tradition of solving conflict and not going to a far-reaching extent in the level of violence being used, especially against the civilian population. And that is being damaged right now. We're seeing a radicalization on all fronts. There's being done a recruitment along sectarian lines. The traditional Yemeni sectarian makeup is Shafi and Saidi, which are quite close to each other and traditionally always coexisted peacefully, prayed in the same mosques. Sectarian lines were not something that were prominent in past conflicts in past recent years, but this is increasingly happening, and that will leave very strong or very deep divisions within society, even when this conflict ends. Um, and then the fragmentation of the state and the military that has been destroyed. So even when we talk about the Houthis withdrawing from positions that they have captured as a part of the negotiations, there's no one to turn them over to because there's no state or no military and nothing yet to take over. So the in conclusion from my side is not very positive, not very optimistic. Yemen has seen a lot of conflict in recent years. This is by far the worst, and it's not being played out according to Yemeni dynamics alone. It's influenced widely by regional trends, and there's a very strong influence of radicalizing and destabilizing factors, which will leave Yemen very hurt at the end. So I hope some of the others have more positive things to say later, but this is my view. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Sis, for this extremely interesting and very thorough outline of the conflict, the situation, perspectives, and access. And I think what we'll do to accommodate the discussion later today, which is going to be a more general, broad discussion, we'll take 5 minutes now with any potential questions directly related to the presentation of Siris before we move on to our next presenter. So if there's any specific questions to the presentation of Siris, we can take them now. Otherwise, we will move to the next presenter and then have a more general discussion later in the day. So, anything? Yeah, I think you'll need a microphone just for the sake of translation.
Yes, my name is William from Berlingske. Shiraz, could you tell us, is there any move from US, from European Union, to stop the blockade on Yemen? Because I mean, it has serious consequences for the local people. And as far as I see it, everybody's just they don't care about what's going on there. It's play that Saudi Arabia can play on its own. Thank you.
Yeah, you can answer it. But obviously, this also touches upon the more broader regional and international implications of the conflict, which we will also come back to, I think. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just answer you briefly. It is a very good question, and the failure of the international community to react to this is also going to have long-term implications for the acceptance of the international community or the role they can play in Yemen going forward. Because the general feeling in Yemen is that they have been let down by the international community. Um, the US is actively taking part in the blockade and is of course behind the scenes trying to minimize a little bit what the Saudis are doing, but they are not willing to take an open conflict with the Saudis. A lot of this comes back to the international dynamics and how Saudi Arabia is doing a lot of what they're doing because they're nervous about the alliance with the US, and we'll get into that later. For the EU part, there's also been a hesitation based on, of course, the need to stay friends with Saudi Arabia. It's difficult to know exactly how much is being done behind the scenes, but definitely not enough.
Thank you, Sis. Any other specific question? Yeah, Daniel?
Hi, my name is Pernille Mortens. I'm with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Media Department. Sis, thank you so much for your presentation. I was wondering, you were talking about all the lessons learned and the mistakes that were made in the last transition process. Now we're in a process of negotiations again, so I was wondering whether you could give some advice to the international actors about, how can we avoid making the same mistakes? What should be, what could be some of the things that we could do to try to help a constructive process moving forward?
Sure, thanks, Camilla. One of the key things is giving more voice to the Yemenis in deciding how things are being structured and planned. I think that step has already partly been taken by the UN in saying that the Geneva talks are solely the Yemenis talking in many ways, and it has been criticized that Saudi Arabia, which is a big part of the conflict, was left out from those talks. So would they even have any significance when Saudi Arabia was not present? But I believe that it's very important that Yemenis themselves take charge in finding the solutions, but that can only really be done when Saudi Arabia and other countries step away. So the biggest role of the international community at this stage is ensuring that Yemen get empowered to handle its own issues, or Yemen is already empowered, but that they get the space and they get allowed without the influence of Saudi Arabia. I think it's quite crucial here to remember that there was actually a political agreement at the end of February that was going to put the whole transition back on track. An agreement that included the Houthis and the different actors, and that the UN had brokered. And it was not until Hadi and Saudi Arabia spoiled that agreement because they weren't happy with it that things really went bad. So minimizing the influence of the international or regional actors and getting Yemen back on track is one key step, and then voicing out for Yemen, handling the humanitarian situation and the immediate urgent matters. And for example, the UK have significantly harmed their acceptance in Yemen by going out recently condemning the Scud missiles that were shot in by the Houthis to Saudi Arabia, which they in every right should condemn. The problem was they went in and condemned that, but they haven't condemned the thousands of civilians that have been killed by Saudi Arabia in Yemen, or the way Saudi Arabia have interfered in Yemen. So a more nuanced attitude that is also bringing in Yemeni views rather than the more regional views would definitely enhance acceptance and the opportunity to come in and support you.
Thank you. I think we'll take one final question before moving on. So, Katarina, you had a question.
Thank you. My name is Katarina Blomqvist. I work with Info. My question is that I read yesterday that President Obama decided to freeze all aid to Yemen for 1 year. And what do you think this decision, what will its impact be on the situation in Yemen, and also for the perspectives of the conflicts going on?
Yeah, I'll answer you briefly. As I've understood it, they are freezing development aid, but not humanitarian aid, and a lot of other countries are in the process of considering that simply because what can you develop when there's no state, when there's no infrastructure? The assistance is shifting from development to more urgent assistance, and of course that is having implications because there are civil society groups in Yemen who need support. There are a lot of forces in Yemen who are working towards peace and towards development goals, and they are being slightly let down now. But as I understand it, it's a shift to focus on the humanitarian situation, but of course it's also again finding acceptance, and it is a news that is reaching Yemen at a very crucial time, and making a lot of people of course upset and disappointed with the international community.
Okay, well, thank you, Sirius, for this for the answers to the questions as well. And now I think we'll move on, and I'm very happy to be able to present Amal El Basha, chairperson for the Assistance Arab Forum for Human Rights, and a close friend of the house as well, who actually very recently contributed or wrote a paper on women's rights and constitutions in Yemen, and is a social activist and very focused on women's rights in Yemen. So Amal will talk about the hope for women's rights during the conflict and perspectives on that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I'm thankful for the Danish Institute to give me several opportunities to be here to talk about women's issues, as well as Kevin for, yes, and a number of Danish friends here. You know, the title of my intervention is What Hopes, and my name is Hope. So, my name is Aman, and it means hope. So, what hopes really that the Yemeni women have nowadays within this current situation? I think our hope is the hope of all the Yemeni society. The immediate hope to be realized is to stop the war, ceasefire, and to bring all of those who are in charge of the war into the negotiation table, to talk again politics, not to use the arms, the one inside Yemen and the one from outside Yemen. I was really worried that to hear that or to read that the Saudi Arabia just withdraw around 36 billion US dollars to buy weapons from the States and from the Western countries. What is happening is that it is not just, you know, internal conflicts. Different groups are fighting or having, each group wants to have more power. It is a regional conflict. It is Iran and Saudi Arabia that are fighting on our lands. Both wants to have more power and more existence in the Yemeni lands. But it is not only that, it's just, we don't have a problem actually to have more Iranian influence in Yemen, because we have the Saudi influence for the last half of the century, where it took us nowhere in terms of human rights, in terms of development, in terms of protection of the Yemeni people and the protection of their dignity. Yemen has been always the backyard of the Saudi Arabia. The interference of the Saudi in Yemen over the last 50 years is obvious. It has been helping the tribal sheikh, leaders, tribes, military leaders, the ex-president Ali Abdullah Saleh, and so many politicians. With political money, Saudi Arabia has been able to stop the development of Yemen and just to keep it like the backyard of its state. We have witnessed the growing of the terrorism in Yemen because of Saudi Arabia. Because Saudi Arabia, and this is what I really hate, that in the Western country and the hypocrisy in the Western country, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to take that Saudi Arabia is the source of extremism in the world, not only in my country. They have been able to export terrorists, train them, and to provide them with weapons, since Afghanistan until today. This is what have been happening worldwide, and because the Saudi Arabia is the big ally of the West, of the US, it is not one of the axis of evils. It's just Iran, Korea, and Cuba. And if we talk also about the human rights in the region, also the records of human rights in Saudi Arabia is awful. It's not that good. However, there is no talk about the violations of human rights in the Saudi Arabia. Why I'm talking about Saudi Arabia? Because Saudi Arabia intervened right from the beginning of our revolution in 2011. The youth took over the streets and they started to scream for a civil state, a modern state, the rule of law, equal citizenship. That was the dreams and the aspiration of all the people who went to the streets by millions and millions. Women, elderly people, youth, people from different parts of Yemen went to the streets dreaming and asking for change. So the Saudi and the GCC came with their, initiative to transfer power, and they start playing with this initiative. And we have the national dialogue. In the national dialogue, we were able to put our dreams into the paper, the outcomes. To some extent, they were great. I would say that 70% of the outcomes of the national dialogue were great. However, the coup d'etat actually started from the first day of the national dialogue when it was launched in 18th March 2013. The president, unfortunately, did not respect the regulations of the national dialogue and is starting to use his power as a legitimate president to play with the regulations and to impose what he wants, starting from the appointment of the presidency of the national dialogue, starting by the appointment of the consent committee of the national dialogue, where he can play with the outcomes of the national dialogue, starting by also the establishment of the constitutional committee. So he was using his legitimate power not in line with the agreements of the national dialogue outcomes. That's why he gives the space and the justification for the Houthi to come with their arms to conquer the city and to say, hey, stop it, enough is enough. We have been advising, we have been writing peacefully, the same way when we went to the streets, peacefully demanding for change. But the power in Yemen, they don't listen to the peaceful voices. They just listen to the weapons voices, and that has been the catastrophe of the Yemeni society. We were alerting the political parties that what is happening now in terms of the implementation of the national dialogue is not exactly what it has been written. And all political parties, all components of the society, the women, the youth, the civil society, they've started to play with the implementation. And that's what led us to the current situation. We knew that the president, he was so weak to the extent that he really cannot implement the outcomes according to what have been agreed upon, because you have the Saudi Arabia, which does not want to see a strong and modern Yemen. How can the Saudi-led agreements would allow for the civil society to have so much impact on the Yemeni future making, while it doesn't have a civil society? They do not allow a single civil society to operate in a free environment. How can I understand that Saudi Arabia will allow women to be empowered where until now they are not allowing women even to drive a car? How I can understand that the Saudi will allow Yemenis to have, the rule of the law, while the Raif Badawi, who is now facing 10 years in prison and 1,000 lashes because he just has written in his blog that they want a state with the rule of law. So how can I understand that the Gulf deal or agreements will allow Yemen to come up as a modern state, democratic state that really protects human rights, women's rights, minorities' rights, disabled rights, LGBT rights, whatever you can name it. I mean, that was the setback from the beginning when the UN and came with this GCC deal to ensure peaceful transfer of power in Yemen. So since then, the political parties took over our revolution, they hijacked our revolution, and they started to play politics. They started to play game, and they are the people who, they are the parties who give the immunity to Ali Abdullah Saleh. They were the people who were against us in the national dialogue, where we were asking for the transitional justice, because there are so many crimes happened in the past, and we don't want it to go unpunished or unquestioned. In the national dialogue, we agreed that women should be represented by not less than 30% in all powers, executive, legislative, and judicial. Later, they did not even respect that agreement. Why? Because we are peaceful movement. We don't have guns, we don't have weapons, we don't have power, yeah, except our voices. And now look what is happening in Geneva. They are negotiating only with political parties. And the other components of the national dialogue, that was also part of the draft constitution, where it says women, youth, and civil society should be part of any negotiation process. Now women are excluded, the youth are excluded, the civil society are excluded. What we want actually, and what our hopes is that, first of all, we need the silence of the international community, and we really, I'm appealing to our friends in the Denmark. Please make your voice very strong and loud to stop the war, to stop this conspiracy of silence. No matter how the Saudi Arabia are your friends, or there are economic interests or whatever, but there are war crimes now are taking place in Yemen by the coalition, what they call it, the decisive storm. That now it is almost the 90 days where on a daily basis there are missiles. They have been destroying the mosques, the ancient castles. There are more than 4,000 people, civilian people, children and women. They died because of their houses destroyed while they were in their houses by these missiles. We want to hold those responsible for the war crimes. We want them accountable for the war crimes. We want in the Human Rights Council to hear that the member of the Danish government speaking about the war crimes, whether it committed by the coalition or by the Houthi or the forces that are pro Ali Abdullah Saleh. Because now we have so many war crimes by the coalitions, where they are destroying schools, hospitals, killing civilians, children, women, elderly, whatever. And we have also these fighting groups, the Houthi and the militia of the Muslim Brothers. Actually, have you ever heard in the newspaper that the fighting is between the Houthi and the militia of the Muslim Brothers? No. They keep saying it's the fighting between the Houthi and the Sunni tribes. We don't have these terms even in Yemen, Sunni tribes. Since we have adopted the political party system, the fighting only between political parties. It is not between Sunni and Shi'i, Zaydi or Shafi'i. No, it is a conflict between political parties, between the GBC or the Islah, between the Socialists and the Islah, between the Nasirites. And so the conflict has been always have these political names, but not tribal or sectarian names like Sunni and Shi'i. And this is now, it is the attempt of the regional power to create this problem that we have sectarian problem. We don't have the sectarian problems, but they are trying to create this problem so that that Yemen can interrupt into this problem, like Iraq, like Syria, like the other countries. What we want also is that our friends, together with the 10 countries, I don't know now how many countries they are supporting the peace process, is to really ensure that the voices of the civil society are part of the political process. The UN now are holding this Geneva, and there are a lot of talk about, okay, what is now the importance of this talk, or what is the agenda. There are a lot of talk about the UN should like enforce the implementation of the resolution 2016, where it talks about the withdrawal of the Houthi and so many things. But at the same time, the UN should also impose the respect for the UN resolution 1325 that talks about women and peace and security, where it talks about that women should also participate in the negotiation table. So if the UN cannot really respect its resolutions, how it can also expect that the countries respect its resolutions related to the internal conflict or fights. What I want from our friends from the civil society and the NGOs also, to write, to talk to your government, to the parliament, that they should have a say in this war taking place in Yemen, because every day passes, there are hundreds of people are killed, women, children, and the humanitarian need is really very great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amal. Like before, we'll take a couple of questions that are specifically directed towards Amal before we will take a short coffee break. So, any specific questions? Yeah, just the one thing. Yeah, Connie, and then Henry.
My name is Connie Christiansen from Kvinfo. I would like to ask you, Amal, what do you see as the consequences of the fact that women have been sidelined as soon as the war started, and there is a peace negotiation going on right now in Geneva? What are the consequences of women having been sidelined in that process?
Well, actually, we have been disappointed, right from the beginning, from the end of the national dialogue, because we were so happy, we were so, optimistic that, okay, women will have more voices, and since we were part of the revolution, we were part of the change process, and there were, agreement that women should be part of any power structure. But we have been, since the end of the national dialogue, we have been, disappointed, and we started to have this feeling that what was in the national dialogue outcomes, it's just an ink on paper, that it was not going to be, that's why we have never reached after the national dialogue into 30%. Take, for example, in the constitutional drafting committee, they never put 30% of this committee for women, although they were supposed to be 30%, although that was one of the outcomes of the national dialogue. The same goes for the other committees that were established. The same goes when they established the government. They didn't also respect this 30%, and they put for us like 2-3 women out of 33 ministers. Now, okay, the women movement in Yemen is really very strong, but because of this war, we have been, distracted. We have been, some of us in the capitals, in Cairo, in Beirut, in London, in Sweden, and we are just, cannot even comprehend that what this is happening now, that there is a war, but we have now trying to work with the UN women to try to influence the new involvement of the UN to include women in the peace process. We have been trying to reach him over the last 3-4 weeks, but he is not. I mean, he is not responding. However, our message has been sent to the UN women mm, uh, that what is happening in Geneva is not according to the national dialogue. If the national dialogue outcome of the document is a reference document that can the future negotiation could be built on. And the Yemeni women now in Yemen, what they are doing, sometimes we have these evil things, but out of these evil things, there are good things is happening. Due to this shortage of oil and fuel in Yemen, where you cannot, have taxis or you cannot, start your cars, women started to ride bicycles. And it was like a big victory that women started to ride bicycles, because it was a shame. Even women are not supposed to ride bicycles, or also, although they ride camels and donkeys, but the bikes, no, that was not allowed. But now women started to ride this. There are also a lot of group discussions in the WhatsApp, in the Facebook. We call Kifaya War, Kifaya Harb. Huh? This is a group now calling for peace in Yemen. And I saw we have been negotiating that, okay, we are going to have a Yemeni women peace platform. The women in the diaspora, we are going to have a meeting very soon, or cluster meetings, one in Beirut, one in Amman, and one in Riyadh, and one in, I don't know where. Okay, like 4 with the UN, because we have so many women activists stranded in the diaspora since the war, because they cannot go back to Yemen, or those cannot get out of Yemen. So we'll have like clusters meetings, so we can come out of these clusters meetings with a document that this is what we want from the negotiating people in Geneva, because Yemen is not their country alone. It's our country as well. So we cannot just wait for them to negotiate or to make a decision, okay, we will go to war or we will go to peace. They have to consider that it is the country of the Yemeni women, who compose like 50% of this 25 million people. So it is not their country, it is not their future, it is our future and our children's futures. And those people who have led the country into the war, they should be, they should be accountable for the crimes that they are that is happening to my country nowadays, because they were fighting for power. They excluded the Houthi at the beginning because the Muslim brothers who took over the country over the 3 years after the revolution, they thought that they are going to be the heir of Ali Abdullah Saleh regime. So that was the turning point where our revolution will really, killed in its heart, because that was not the aim of our revolution. Our revolution is to have a country where it has a space for all social and political powers. So the Houthis, they felt that they are going to face the same problem like before during Ali Abdullah Saleh regime, while they are part of the revolution. So the Muslim brothers took over the same like what happened in Egypt. They took over, and then the military come, Sisi and his group. In Yemen, we don't have a military because the military is divided between Ali Saleh and we have Al-Qaeda. And Al-Qaeda is also Yemeni-made brand. We have so many Al-Qaeda. Now, just think what is happening. They are attacking the Houthi forces, what they call it, Houthi forces and Bro Ali Abdullah Saleh forces. But actually, these are the Yemeni army. It means that this army is ex-Ali Abdullah Saleh, but does not support the legitimate president. And the legitimate president, he has lost his legitimacy last year when his term finished. And he was supposed to come into a new form of way to rule the country, a presidential council, whatever. But he was insisting that he wants to be the president of the republic. He does not want a council. And he lost legitimacy. That's why the problem get complicated more and more, because he wants to be in power alone. He wants to make the decisions. He made so many mistakes. I'm not saying that the Houthi are our good alternative, But what I'm saying that his mistakes and his coup d'etat, all the outcomes, he led to the current situation. That led to the current blood, and I don't know whether this blood is going to stop in the very near future. Because look what happened in Syria and Iraq. Up till now, they are bleeding, and we are counting now on our friends in the Western Hemisphere that okay, they to talk to their friends, the Saudi friends, to talk to the UN that they should make these people accountable. They should not fight on our lands. Saudi Arabia and Iran, both they have very big lands. They can go and fight. Why they are choosing, those countries to fight in there and to for the people to die? They have the money, they have the weapons, they have the oil, they have everything, but they are not willing to their people to die. So the Yemenis are dying instead, the Syrians are dying instead, the Iraqi are dying instead, and we have to say enough is enough to all of this power who have been using the other countries as battlefields so that they can gain more power and regional power in that part of the world.
Well, thank you, Amal. I think we'll take just one more question from Hannah before then we'll take a short coffee break.
Catholics believe in sins of commission, sins that you commit, but also sins of omission. And many people in Yemen, also leading intellectuals like you, are also falling into the trap of focusing on one part of the conflict. I know that you are not so much into that. When we hear you, we listen about how bad Saudi Arabia, its policy is, etc., etc. But I know also that you can make the same account on what Iran is doing, and you mentioned maybe Iran once or twice.
Yeah.
But don't you think it's one of the most dangerous side effects of this war is that increasingly the people who are supposed to become, our guides into the conflict are falling into the trap of sectarian and regional polarization and trying and feeling forced to choose one of the two evils, either to back Iran or to back Saudi Arabia. So I would like also to have your take on Iran.
Yeah.
Has Iran been a positive? I know all the evils of Saudi Arabia, but how about Iran?
Well, as a Yemeni, I'm talking now about my country. Over the last 50 years, and I have made it clear that over the 50 or half a century, Yemen has been under the Saudi influence, under the Saudi, patronage. For the Iranian, I don't have the experience to tell you whether they are bad or good, but the Yemeni has been influenced by the Saudi, where we have this political money. They have put millions and millions to the hands of the politicians, the military people. While if they really support the development of Yemen, if they put more money into development, schools, hospitals, infrastructure, the whole Yemeni will be with Saudi Arabia. We don't have a problem to be with our neighbor and the big sister as it, but we are against its policies that really stop the development of Yemen. I know that we have discussed this before, that what is our problem with the Iran and Saudi Arabia? I don't have a problem if you choose to have this mullah, or you have to choose to have the king, or to have, that's if the people of that countries they want that. My problem with that is that they are not respecting human rights. They are not democratic countries. They are not really into the rule of the law. This is my problems. But for what is happening so far, that I have seen the evil in my country of the Saudi Arabia. I haven't seen the evil of the Iran as much as I have seen the, yes, they are supporting the Houthi because they think that all of this Shia in the world, they have been, uh, persecuted by the Bahraini regime. But what's happening? What happened now? The scenario in Yemen. Look, we have two Arab Springs that has been, um, not in the not welcomed by the Saudi Arabia. We have the one in Syria and one in Egypt and Libya. and maybe you are following now what's happening. But for the revolution in Bahrain, nobody talk about it. It was, it was killed right from the beginning. They sent the Dar Al Jazeera, what do you call it?
The shields of the
The
Gulf.
shield of the Arabian and themselves. They send the army into Bahrain to really get rid of the revolution there, because they said, this is supported by Iran and blah blah. And now, exactly what happened in Bahrain, they are sending to us the coalition decisive. I don't know what. So it's the same thing. They are using the Saudi Arabia because Yemen is not fully into the hands of the Saudis, because we have civil society, we have political parties, we have a vibrant, civil society actors. It's not like the Bahraini, where Bahrain is a small and the whole regime is fully, in the hand of the Saudi, and they get full support. So now what is happening now is that they could not really control or influence the Yemeni revolutions, because most of the Yemeni people, we don't like to be part of the Saudi influence. That's why we have this revolution. We want to be free. We want to have autonomous states. We have to have relations with Iran or whatever countries, but that should be the decision of the Yemenis, not because Saudi does not want the Iranians to be there. I'll give you an example. 2 months ago, we heard that the Iranian Airways started to come to Yemen during the Houthi, when they took over, and it was like a huge cry. Why the Iranian came to Yemen? Why the Iran? It was just an airway. So I wrote once. I said, okay, now we have the Turkish Air, we have the Saudi Air, we have all of these airways that have been operating in my country for decades. Nobody said why the Iranian did not have any kind of contact with the Yemenis. Why we don't have, right from the first place, we don't have Iranians airways to operate like it operates also in Saudi Arabia. It operates in Emirates, although they have this problem of the lands, the islands that is occupied by the Iranian. Why, when it comes to Yemen, we have just an airways operating in Yemen? It has become like a big issue, a fuzzy issue. I understand that because the timing was not really suitable, but this question should be, we as a country, a sovereign country, we should not just boycott whatever coming from Iran because Saudi Arabia has a problem with Iran. No, we should have a mutual economic relationships like Iran has the same thing with Saudi Arabia, with the Emirates. We have these minorities, or not minorities actually, this Zaidi. They should have the right to worship whatever they want. As a human rights activist, I don't care if you worship Muhammad or Ali or a cow or whatever you want, because that is your belief and I have to respect that belief. But when it comes to using force or violence, that I should worship what you believe in, here is my problem. But we believe in diversity. Okay, let the people believe in what they believe. Let them, practice the rituals in a diverse society. This should be the norm. I've been in so many Western countries where I see the synagogue, the mosque, and the church, all together. Why, if we have like a mosque Shi'i or a mosque Sunni, then it is a problem? Why I should have either or? No, I don't have a problem with any of these. They should be coexist in my country with full respect. But we should have, and this is my belief, that we should have a secular state where it can guarantee the right of every individual to worship or to have the faith, or to choose the faith that they are really comfortable with. We should not impose on the people that, like now what is happening. We heard that Al-Houthi said in this Ramadan, there are no this kind of salah after they break the Tarawih. Yeah, this is a Sunni practice. Now the Houthi said no salah. after you break your fasting. So why is that? I mean, let the people either to pray until the dawn or or to go to sleep. What is the problem with that? So the whole issue then, since the beginning of the war of Sa'da in 2004, it's a matter of freedom of expression and practice. If we don't like this group, no, we are demonize them. They are evil. They are I don't know what. They are dangerous to my belief. Their existence is really going to hurt me. So the same like women's movement. When we started our movement in Yemen, they said, "Oh, now it is the West who are supporting these women. It is going to be dangerous to the value system of the country. It is now they are the puppet of the West, and they are implementing Western agenda." And this is my request from you, my friends. The women agenda is a human agenda, is a universal agenda. Don't go by those discourses saying, okay, you are interfering in our cultural, setup. I don't care about the cultural values of any country if it's going to violate the rights of the people to live in dignity. So I don't accept that a 10 years old girl is married, or and actually she is raped, and our people saying we don't want the West to interfere in our value system because this is how we have been, for centuries, and this is God's will, and this is the Sharia. No, you have to support us in our struggle against early marriage, against violence against women, against women exclusion, against FGM, because if we are sharing these human values and these universal values, you should support and stand loud and say, and you say it black and white. What is crime is crime. You know what happened in this Swedish minister, which I really admire, when she stands with the against the Saudi with regard to Raif Badawi. Unfortunately, not a single minister of foreign affairs stood in supporting her position. How? What is this hypocrisy? While the GCC, 7 countries or 6 countries, they came together and they asked for this foreign ministers to apologize for the interference in the Saudi affairs. I mean, why we are not seeing this solidarity? Or I mean, the European Union, for example, they should have a strong stance against Saudi Arabia, because they really humiliated the foreign minister of Sweden by not allowing her to deliver a statement in the, I don't know where she was supposed to do that, in the Arab League summit. So why you are not having this solidarity when it comes to the human rights? Why you are so soft? I mean, we don't want you to be soft when it comes to the violation of human rights, when it comes to the women's rights. I have been empowered, and this is what I'm saying, by my sisters in the Western countries, where we met first time in Beijing. That was 25 years. We saw how powerful those women's movement. We saw their agenda was very tiny. They were looking for, some issues related to whatever political powers. While we came from the third world, and our agenda is full of issues. Oh, violence against women and political empowerment, economic, water, and blah, blah, blah things. So we have been empowered by our partnership, by networking, by exposing to what is happening, and we have been able to achieve to a certain extent some developments. Don't let us down. Stay strong in your support, and what we want is political and moral support. Don't buy by those who are saying, okay, the West is trying to يخربوا بناتنا. Huh?
Corrupt our girls.
Yeah, they want to corrupt our girls. Yeah, if we are corrupt from our countries. It's not you who is going to corrupt us. And I have come to know that the corrupt girls in the Arab countries or in my country is more than the other countries, except that we don't expose our ills. We don't tell our problems. We always hide and pretend to say that, okay, everything is fine, everything is fine. One final word. I hear this all the time. I'm not representing the Yemeni woman, and maybe she's okay. What I'm going to talk is representing me, not representing Yemeni. This is what I really hate. yes, maybe there aren't so many women who are unveiled like me in Yemen, but I'm speaking the voice of a big majority of the Yemenis who wants to be free, who wants to be empowered, who wants to be unveiled, who wants to speak, without fear of being, be accused of being westernized or, modernized or whatever. So I'm speaking on behalf of a large group of the Yemeni women where I know that they want to be empowered and they want to participate in the country's politics and development and who wants to live in dignity.
Well, thank you very much for this vivid input to the presentation. I think it's very useful to have that perspective to the conflict as well. Now we'll take 10-15 minutes for a coffee break before we'll get back to the discussion from Sarah. So thank you. Let's say 20 to 12 we'll start again.
ايه بس انت talking about intimidation. لا تمثيل النساء 4 نساء 17 No, I'm not talking about the draft. I'm talking about the drafting committee. drafting committee 4 نقصونا واحدة وين 30 المينيمم
30%
ايه ما اعطونا 30%
ما اخترنا بس بالدرافت موجود
حبيبي I'm not talking about the draft constitution. I'm talking about the committees that was the implementation of this.
احنا كلنا متفقين معك بس في مسألة تحديدا السؤال oil and mark. That's the answer. Simple. The answer is simple. Oil and mark.